And I will continue with this argument looking at the other side. You remember, I'm now going to this part, especially to my Chinese. No, I'm going fully the wrong direction. No. Chinese. Now, the normal explanation is not on this sheet, because they say Chinese are doing so well because they are hit in a very authoritarian educational system and they are forced to learn. And that's why I show you in a second both outcomes from China and outcomes from Chinese immigrants in Australia, New Zealand, Portugal, Austria and Scotland. In the later, so the Chinese outside Asia, they don't have an authoritarian educational system. They live in other non-Asian countries, and so there this explanation should not apply. They should do the same as other immigrants. A second argument, which is, I think, more valid, is that Chinese culture attribute a higher value to education. And that's, of course, ingrained in the long history of China. In China, although being a feudal country, had always had a main education as the other main avenue for social mobility, with local, provincial and national examinations. And you succeeded in an examination not because you were the friend of the friend or the son of the father, but because you really, it was a very meritocratic system with negative effects. But education was there for centuries, far longer than in Europe, a real avenue to high positions. Perhaps in the same way, in a comparable way as the Catholic Church has been for some groups, but of course the Church has the problem that you could not marry and establish yourself. That's a first argument, and we will go into that. The third argument, there is a neuropsychological advantage of writing symbols of Chinese language. If you have to learn at an early age 3,000 characters, and you can only learn that by memorizing them, you are training your brains. You don't learn that at the age of 15 anymore. You learn it early or you don't learn it. All right? Secondly, it's very well established in literature that Chinese numbers are far more clear than numbers in the French language. The French language is the worst, of course. 98, right? But we all have this in all European languages. Which basically means, while the Chinese system is very clear, it is easier to remember a huge number, and the Chinese numbers are fully based on the 10 base. So it allows you to make computations in your head on a larger digit bit. Now let's first go to the attributed value of, and you have to, I think, to have to look. This is time spent on reading and the importance of good notes. And time spent on reading is here including at home. So not only in school, but also including at home, all together. And have a look, you see that, for instance, that the Chinese speaking, so and here means Chinese speaking, that they speak Chinese at home, right? So this is my main group, Chinese speaking, second generation Chinese immigrant outside Asia. Not as much as the first generation, but still far more higher than the non-Chinese speaking natives outside Asia. The non-Chinese speaking natives out of Asia are the Scots, the Portuguese, the Austrians, the Australians and the New Zealanders together. right? Just to give you a reference. These are the natives in non-Chinese speaking natives in Asia. That means in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Macau. You cannot say this is only because of this Hong Kong, because I've also Macau in it. And you know, perhaps Spanish very well, this Portuguese colony on the Chinese coast, but this is not very famous for its economic activity. It's very famous for other things which I don't dare to mention here. But they still score very high, right? Important of note is less important, right? So there is some argument that time spent on education is far more important among the Chinese immigrants outside and inside than for the non-Chinese. So we have to take that into account. Non-Chinese, Chinese-speaking generation, value, good note, most. That's the other side of the story. Yeah? Non-Chinese speaking, third generation Chinese immigrant out in Asia and outside Asia spend most time on reading. But these are the scores in math and reading. I did it both to avoid that you say this only a math effect. Right? That's why I also show it for reading. After control for the time spent and parental background, all the usual suspects. And let's move directly to the Chinese-speaking second-generation immigrants outside Asia. 575. These are the natives in the country where they live in. A difference of 70 points. Double the distance between Germany and Finland. And this is controlled for all the usual suspects. It is, by the way, less clear in reading. This is math. Remember the easiness of the numbers. But even in reading, this is still true. 500 points. I'm sorry, 50 points. Remember that they speak Chinese at home. So basically what I'm saying here, Chinese immigrant, please continue to speak Chinese at home. You will do far better in education. Don't learn the language. Or learn the language, but don't use it at home. Which, of course, is a very strange argument. But this is what I can find. You see immediately a drop for the non-Chinese speaking. Here are the non-Chinese speaking. Still doing better than the natives. But less than the Chinese speaking. Chinese-speaking 15 years old pupils in and outside Asia have a higher math score and reading score than comparable non-Chinese speaking natives in and outside Asia. Single country explanations such as the Chinese selective immigrant. That's often an argument in the United States. Or the authoritarian Chinese education system cannot explain these results. The high value of learning fails to explain the math score of Chinese pupils, and especially if immigrant pupils use the Chinese language at home. The high transparency of Chinese numbers, I mentioned that already earlier, seems to be an explanation of this high math scores of Chinese-speaking pupils in and outside Asia, next to the increase in memorizing capacity by learning at least 3,000 characters at a very young age. Some final conclusions. Yes. Individual, and I have to stress this, individual characteristics are far more important than the explanation of educational outcomes than any macro characteristic. I didn't stress this during this presentation because otherwise I would have needed 3 hours. But so it's better to have high educated parents and being smart from a country with a very few compulsory education and so on, than the other way around. That's always true. Also in this immigration result. Individual characteristics are the most important thing. Then comes school characteristics, of which I will speak tomorrow, one more. And then origin characteristics. But they are more important than destination. Giving this restriction to rich destination countries. Because you might have noticed that the destination countries have a more narrow range than the origin country. It's all more or less rich European OECD countries. While the origin countries have a far broader range, and so you have more variations there to be explained. Having said that, origin is a real important thing. And there are a lot of analysis which doesn't take that into account. I took two relatively important international thing. First of the OECD, which is analysis of PISA 2003, in which country of origin was already available. Not for that many countries, but was available. And they have fully ignored it. As a consequence, Finland comes out best. Because you have only yes-no immigrant. Now, if you look at the Finnish case, you have only people from Sweden and Russia. That's the easy trick. And you have wrong outcomes. I'm not saying that the comprehensive outcome is wrong, but the analysis is wrong. I'm saying that the low score from Germany, relatively low score from Germany, was caused by Turks, as sometimes was suggested in the discussion in Germany. But not taking into account that difference might lead to wrong estimation of the Finnish-German differences. And you don't see this back in an European Commission report quite recently, which is on immigration and mobility challenge and opportunities for EU educational system. It only goes on destination, no word about origin. This is just propaganda. If you want to find all the references, you find it here. If you go to my homepage, which is on the first page, you can click and come on my outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moltíssimes gràcies al professor Dronkers, entre altres coses, per haver-se cenyit el temps, que no sempre és així, que li hem donat per fer la seva exposició. També moltíssimes gràcies per la claredat de les seves xifres, que no han estat xineses per nosaltres, tampoc. Ell ha volgut adaptar molt el que és una anàlisi rigorosa i de vegades em preguntava durant aquest temps que hem estat en contacte si havia de donar moltes explicacions estadístiques i hem demanat que ho fes al màxim de digerible per un públic que no som especialistes en temes d'investigació comparada. Per tant, jo crec que ha fet aquest esforç d'adaptar resultats complexes per poder fer aquesta suggerent exposició. És el moment d'obrir el debat, és el moment que puguem fer les nostres aportacions, preguntes al professor Dronkers. Si us sembla, agafarem un primer torn de paraules, si hi ha paraules, i després el professor respondrà a les preguntes que tingueu. Per allà hi ha una paraula. Hi ha alguna altra pregunta? Per allà n'hi ha una altra. I agafaríem... Sí. En tinc dues? Tres. L'altra no l'he vist. Sí o no?
Allà darrere.
Allà darrere. Val, molt bé. Doncs fem tres preguntes i després el professor respondrà. Un micro per allà, sisplau. Aquí. Aixequeu bé el braç perquè si no, des d'aquí no us veig, quan demaneu paraules. Gràcies.
Okay, good evening.
Well, I was quite surprised about the result when you were talking about the no significant effects of macro futures in the society, in the country of destination. And you talked about the labor market access variable. I wonder why you didn't take the unemployment rate of immigrant population there, because you would be measuring maybe the real discrimination of the immigrant population.
Moltes gràcies. Hi havia una altra pregunta aquí. Aquí, sisplau.
I thank you for the explanation. I have two questions. And first part of your presentation, you speak about the visibility of migrants in Europe. Some connection with the perception and expectation of teachers about immigrant children. And the second question, you speak about in the Eastern religion case, the value of education and this in the origin culture, and in some way you explain the Chinese case with the link between education and social mobility. It's my question is how much is work the link between education and social mobility about destination countries in school results. I mean.
I una tercera aquí, sisplau.
Sí, era un aclariment, o jo potser no ho he entès, no? Un moment que ha dit que la segona generació d'homes immigrants amb religió islàmica tenien resultats pitjors acadèmics i això no era degut a la religió dominant en el seu país d'origen. Llavors la meva pregunta era saber quina és la raó que aquesta segona generació d'homes diguem-ne musulmans o d'origen islàmic els hi vagi tan malament, i això vol dir, suposo, que està comparat amb com els hi va a les noies, i m'agradaria saber si pot aprofundir sobre això. I inevitablement, a mesura que l'anava sentint, clar, tot això té moltes implicacions a nivell de les polítiques educatives. Si ens diu que té més efecte el país d'origen que no pas les polítiques en destinació, què és el que es pot fer des del país de destinació, diguem-ne, per fer front a aquest fracàs escolar que, a més, es reprodueix, o sigui, passa de la primera generació a la segona, en molts casos amb molt poques millores. Gràcies.
Moltes gràcies. Professor, si vol respondre amb una certa brevetat, perquè hi havia algunes altres paraules que puguem fer un altre torn de preguntes. Moltes gràcies.
I can go on for hours. That was a good question on unemployment rate. We tried that. And partly the answer is if you would not take educational outcomes as an indicator, but labor market success, you were right. Remember, and that's, I come back to it, this PISA, you are 15 years old. So unemployment rate is not a real good indicator of the real underground. But then the problem with unemployment rate is that it is in some way polluted by in which whether you live in a welfare state or a social welfare state or a conservative welfare state. So it is not a good measurement of the amount of experience indicator for education. You find this effect if you focus on labor market outcomes of immigrants. Then there are two effects: the amount of unemployment, as you mentioned, but I have to also, that's one side of the coin. I have also to say another side of the coin is that in countries of destination in which there's less regulation of the labor market, let me say England compared to Sweden, immigrants do better in countries with less regulation of the labor market, with less protection on the labor market. Because protection on the labor market first protects the insiders and not the outsiders. So there are two sides to the coin with this unemployment. But you are right, and I've tried it. I started with the same idea as you had. That's partly an answer also to the question on the boys and the girls. In the analysis with the European Social Survey, we have the final educational level of boys and girls. While the PISA is on 15 years old. Now, if you have adult respondents, then these male-female differences are very clear with Islam. It's a bit already visible in the PISA, but not very strong. It builds up actually later. Let me say, in the choice of staying in education or having education as the best avenue for mobility, which might be different for male and females in that situation. So there's something to be seen in PISA, but not that much. You see it better at the end of the educational career. And it is real individual Islamic religion and not the country of origin. There's a clear link. I'm coming back to the other question as well. There's a clear link between education and mobility, even for immigrants. Immigrants with higher education have higher possibilities. Having said that, not as high as the natives. It's very clear that second generation immigrants in Europe, there's a lot of work on this, with the same educational background, blah, 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 has less opportunities, not only to enter the labor market, that's not the main problem anymore there, but to get a good position on the labor market. And it is even in countries like the Netherlands, not the point that they don't enter the labor market, they don't get my job. They get lower jobs, right? So yes, there is a clear link, but the link is less strong. On the other hand, you can also say perhaps immigrants have no more other opportunities than education. Next to an ethnic enclave in ethnic shops and ethnic shops and trade and these things. But that might be, although on the short run a success, in the long run a quite negative point to if you are caught into that. So there is a link of education and mobility, but less strong for immigrants. And I'm referring to specific group of immigrants. Of course, the expectation of the teacher might be an important role, because not because of teachers are bad persons, but teachers are part of that society. So if a society like European societies has a different position vis-à-vis immigrants, let me say, than Australians has, also teachers will have a different position. Now, you can also say, yeah, that's very easy for the Australians. They are all immigrants. Partly by killing all natives there. I mean, this does not sound very nice, but that's basically what happened in Australia. And also, by the way, in the United States. So, on the one hand, that means nobody can say why you are here, because they are all immigrants. On the other hand, there's a price to be paid. While in Europe, this question is more difficult. And I don't want to blame teachers especially, and saying it are the teachers, and if they would have the good expectation, things would go better. I think that would be too easy. Now, there was the most difficult question: what can you do if you know that the country of origin is an important thing? Now, first of all, I think first important always, even if it is bad news, is to know. Ignorance is the worst thing. But let us, if origin is so important, you can also use it as a strength. I'm now bringing up a difficult topic. Let's assume that we want to use the strength of country of origin. In that case, we don't want to spread out the immigrants among a lot of different countries. We would like to concentrate them. And in such a way that we have an Islamic Turkish school or a Moroccan school in school which specialized, which use, which of course that has negative consequences for the society. But it is clear in Dutch research that Islamic schools do better than comparable public schools. I mean comparable with the same socioeconomic composition and socioeconomic background. Better in educational outcomes, which is a way of saying they were specializing themselves on a specific group, and mostly Islamic schools are both ethnic and religious specific, because Moroccan and Turks hardly go to the same Islamic school. You have basically, and the same holds for Suriname Islam, don't go to Turkish school and so on. So you have specialized schools, as there existed more formally elsewhere. So there are negative sides to having Islamic schools, because you might say this is a separation from broader society, and this is not a good idea. And I accept that argument that it is a separation, because it is clear that parents in Islamic schools in the Netherlands have a larger distance to Dutch society than parents in public schools, Turkish parents in public schools. On the other hand, if you have to choose, what would we prefer? Having Turkish immigrants with a good diploma or without a diploma? I think if I would be a politician and I have to make a difficult decision, I would prefer with a diploma. And try to find other ways to bridge the other things. But that's a political decision. My basic argument here is we need to acknowledge these differences. We need to acknowledge that language can do different things. Language at home can do different things, as I showed in the Chinese case. And that religion is not something, it doesn't need to be something eternal, but can be used. And that there are not easy solutions here. Yeah. But ignoring is the most stupidest thing you can do. Because you are running then after the wrong solutions. And saying everything, for instance, everything is socio-economic background. And if we give them money, the problem is solved. Sorry.
Moltes gràcies. Hi havia més paraules. Farem un altre torn. Un últim torn. Em semblava que algú havia aixecat la mà. S'han fos les preguntes. Allà hi ha una pregunta. Hi ha alguna pregunta més? Hi ha algú que tingui... Bé. Ricard?
Hola, bona tarda. Com que són dades i no hi podem fer res, doncs tranquils. Jo faré la pregunta ben tranquil·la, no? Com deia el professor Dronkers. He llegit algun article seu en el que m'ha semblat que era molt crític amb una trajectòria de polítiques educatives, en el que en diu vostè la socialdemocràcia a Europa, que jo lligaria amb això últim que ha dit vostè, que era una opinió també difícil. Em permeto la llibertat de formular-li aquesta pregunta, que no és ben bé el que ha dit vostè. Dóna la impressió com si, amb aquesta frase final, aquesta idea final que deia vostè, a Europa no hagi fet una aposta perquè hi hagi un tant per cent de la població escolar, immigrant, que es qualifiqui, és a dir, que tingui la qualificació, que tingui el títol, per entendre'ns. No sé si anava per aquí el que he llegit de vostè en aquell article que feia referència a l'Anna al començament, i si té ganes de contestar la pregunta. és certa aquesta tesi, és a dir, que Europa no havia fet una aposta prou valenta en el sentit del que vostè recomanava si fos polític, que és l'única valoració política que l'he sentit en tota la nit. Vaig ben encaminat o ho he llegit malament?
I don't fully understand your question, but let me start to answer it. This better? I have made analysis on Islamic schools, not only myself, but also colleagues of mine. So from that point of view, I have made this argument and I'm still working on it. Let me say it differently. No, let me say two things. Let me say two things. First of all, I have done this work on the neighborhood level, which is I've shown that if you have a very ethnic diverse neighborhood, trust in that neighborhood is lower. Not only in the United States, but also in the Netherlands. So from that point of view, that's one of the arguments you might make for this ethnic Islamic school argument. I'm not advocating it, but I'm saying this is a possibility to use it. I hope to present, I'm now currently working, it's always the problem with writing books that comes after what you have done or what you are doing. I'm currently working on ethnic heterogeneous schools, whether that's good or bad for pupils. I'm here referring to ethnic heterogeneous schools in which you have a lot of diverse nationalities. An Islamic school, from that point of view, is a very homogeneous school, in the same way as a purely white school is a very homogeneous school. So we have then three different dimensions: socioeconomic composition, which always is very strong, the percentages of natives, which is a second line, and the third line is the ethnic heterogeneity, right? And basically, I'm now coming back to the book you refer to. If you have a very heterogeneous class, you have to make you have to use more time to balance the class. If you have children from the Caribbean, from Latin America, from Turkey, from Algeria, from Iran, all in your class, you have to spend a lot of teaching and learning time on non-academic issues, because to balance the class. If you have only from Iran, it's not on this list, but a very nice paper, I'm very proud on it, which analyzed the effect of divorce on children, on outcome of education or outcome of children with PISA. Now that's very normal. We know that divorce has a negative outcome on children. There's no debate about that. Not as large as the church would claim, but larger than lot of secular people hope. Right? I'm not going into this, but a very interesting result into this is also the percentage single parents in a school or in a class. The higher that percentage is, the more negative it works. Not only for the children of divorced parents, but for all of them. Now, if you think of the explanation, you come in the same argument. If you have only one divorced child in your class, she might be sometimes in emotional difficult problems, but you can handle that. If 1/3 of your children comes from divorced families, it might become too much. You can no longer handle it. And it starts to affect your teaching and learning time. And that's beside. So there are a lot of mechanisms, not only related to immigrant, which affect this teaching and learning time. Which is perhaps not a pleasant story, but I'm not for the pleasant story. said this, it is still far more important to have high educated parents. So if you can get high educated parents, you have to take into account that let them divorce. But never take low educated parents, even if they stay together. Right? That's always the story. The individual effect is the most important effect. Which is not the same as saying that the other effects are not there. The paper I mentioned too is the Lange Dronkers and Wolbers. You can find it on my own page. Also with PISA data. I'm very proud of it.
Bé, moltíssimes gràcies al professor Jaap Dronkers i a tots vosaltres per l'interès de seguir aquest debat i per la vostra presència aquí a debats d'educació i la participació que hem tingut. Us volem només recordar les properes dates de debats d'educació.
Sí, bé, primerament recordeu que la ponència del professor Dronkers estarà disponible a la web dels debats d'educació, com totes les anteriors. Els que de fet esteu subscrits en aquesta pàgina en rebreu informació puntual i recordar-vos, com us deia l'Anna, doncs, per acabar, que la propera convocatòria d'aquests debats aquesta vegada no serà tan aviat, però la tindrem en qualsevol cas a principis ja de mes de maig, concretament l'11 de maig amb en Daniel Inerarity, i bé, novament agrair al professor Dronkers la seva ponència d'avui i a tots vosaltres la vostra assistència fins a la propera. Moltes gràcies.